All right, let's talk about the Sony Burano. So I've had the Burano for about 6 months, and I wanted to do this sort of update video and to also showcase some of the accessories that I've kind of curated for my rig. I've been really happy with my rig, and not to say that, you know, certain pieces are better than others and you should buy them right now and use my affiliate links, but they're just pieces that kind of work for me, and it's at the end of the day, it's all just personal preference, and they all are essentially really good. It's just kind of tailored to your specific needs. So to start off, I want to go over the whole cage system. So I went with the ARRI PCA mainly because I use a lot of the ARRI accessories on my Sony FX9, and I just fell in love with them. They just worked so well and just made the camera so much better in terms of ergonomics and being able to rig things off of the camera and just putting things in kind of a really tidy configuration. So ever since I had the Sony FX9 kit, I was sold. So that just basically transferred over to the Burano. So now there's a lot of other kind of systems available from Tangerine, Wooden Camera, Mid49, and they're all great too. But again, going back to personal preference, this is the system that I have just kind of chosen. So I really didn't want to be locked into just one system, whether that be a dovetail or a VCT. I wanted the option of having both, and I knew you could do that with the ARRI PCA, so that was kind of, at the time, my biggest consideration. Now, there are a few more options, like Tangerine has a really great option to kind of going back and forth between the two, but at the time, again, I chose the ARRI PCA. So normally, 99% of the time, I'm just rocking a bridge plate sled, and so this just allows me to slide back and forth on a regular dovetail. I also have the VCT option, so I can just pop this off the plate and then just pop this whole rig right onto here easily, no problem, and I have a VCT. And the nice thing about this is that it has a sliding platform, so you can adjust your front to back balance. And so this is super important for me, or really for anyone, because when the camera's on the shoulder, you want to make sure you have the right balance so you're not just fighting the rig. And a lot of people don't realize that shoulder rigs, like there's kind of an art form to shoulder rigs. You most of the time want the center of balance to be kind of right over your shoulder, and that means that more or less the lens mount, you want the lens mount to be right over the shoulder. So by having this sliding platform, you can slide the camera back far enough to where you're properly balanced and not fighting it with your arms or even pulling it back with your arms if it's too back heavy. So obviously that kind of depends on the lens and your build, but this, if you're doing any shoulder work, having a platform that you can slide back and forth, absolutely necessary. I also have this BP8, so this is just an OG ARRI bridge plate. So in lieu of this sliding adapter, I would just put this on, and this is mainly if I ever wanted to use 19mm rails. So if I'm doing a commercial or doing something more studio-centric and I'm using bigger lenses, I usually prefer to use 19mm if I can. So, but most of the time I'm just not and just don't need it, but I like having the option of having it. So that's why I just opt for this, because it's nice and low profile and it doesn't, you know, obviously there's a kind of a big size difference there. So really quick, I also want to talk about the Tangerine options, which I also think are really cool. This is their shoulder pad, and as you can see, it's kind of quite extensive. But the really cool thing about this is that the Tangerine stuff is Bud 3 compatible from a lot of ARRI's accessories. So on the newer Alexa 35, it uses a new base plate. Basically, it's just a much wider base plate. On my Mini LF, I'm currently on the older system, so I have the option to upgrade to some of the newer accessories, which are a little bit more improved. It's just really expensive, and I haven't really found that need to do so yet, so that's why I haven't upgraded. Otherwise, my ARRI base plate, I could just switch back and forth between my Burano and my Alexa, which, you know, sounds really cool, but it's just really, again, it's really expensive, and I just haven't found that need. Also, on the newer system, it kind of requires you to use the rear accessory bracket, and that's not something that I always use. As you can, in this configuration, I have the battery plate off to the side, so it kind of just shortens up the rig, and again, I don't want to be forced into having to use something I typically don't use, so that's also another reason I haven't really upgraded to Bud 3 for the Alexa. But this shoulder pad for the Burano is, honestly, it's amazing because you can see just how much of a difference there is in terms of the sliding platform. It's pretty substantial, so obviously tons of front to back real estate there. And again, if you're using really big lenses, it's super important to be able to get the lens mount just right above the shoulder. So you can imagine if you're using a big lens, like you just want to send this back as much as you can. Also, the shoulder pad, super comfortable. It's a new kind of Casbah system. And it's also really cool because you can kind of reposition a little bit of front to back, but you can kind of really position the side to side, which I find really neat with the bright Tangerine. And then also, if you're just using a regular dovetail, I've used these for years on my FX6s, the left field kind of baseplate system, which is really cool because it's kind of like the CBP on the ARRIs where you can just kind of take it out and side load just a traditional ARRI dovetail. Super convenient when you have rods coming out and motors all rigged up, and it would just be a pain in the ass to slide on traditionally. That is the one thing I will say that whereas the ARRI PCA doesn't quite hit the mark because to get it off the dovetail, I need to unlock the sliding platform and then come straight in and on and off. And it's not always ideal. Like that's where I'd kind of prefer something much more like this where you can just easily come on and off, but it's fine. So coming out to the side, the ARRI PCA set comes with these two NATO rails on the side, which I really like. A lot of the Burano systems have kind of incorporated this NATO rail, and I'm here for it. I really like it. NATO rail is super versatile, and it's super handy to have. The only thing I will say is that you can't really mount RMBs to the NATO rail because the mounting screws are a little bit wider than the NATO standard. So in lieu of that, they also include a NATO to rod mount. So this is just a standard NATO rail, just goes on, and then you can mount a 15 or 19 millimeter rod here for your lens motors. I haven't really been getting much use out of this, only because I typically am using the front console for the rods, but this also is a nice option to have. Also included in this kit is the kind of transmitter bracket. So this is cool because you can kind of flip it any which way you want. And then so on this, I'll usually kind of just add my transmitter of choice. Lately, it has been DJI. I know I've been kind of doing a lot of DJI content lately, but I've just also genuinely been using their products lately. I have been using this SDR mainly because it's small and lightweight and doesn't draw a ton of, I think it draws like 8 watts, so it doesn't draw a ton of power, and it's for what I need, most of what I need on a lot of smaller crew jobs. It's really perfect. I'm using it now to make this video, just streaming directly from Wi-Fi, and it's just been super handy. I actually just did a recent travel job where I specifically chose the SDR because it was an extremely limited crew. It was just me and an AC and a director. So I chose the SDR for the fact that I was able to stream directly to an iPad. I didn't even give the director an iPad. I just had the director bring his own iPad and then just stream directly to that iPad. And that way we didn't have to worry about bringing extra cases, extra monitors, extra batteries, and charging all that, because again, I was trying to bring as little as possible, and by just having this on here, it's just kind of works, and we didn't have to bring all this extra stuff with us. So the SDR is great. Again, I've been using it lately for a lot of stuff. I think I did get some things wrong in my previous video where I was kind of comparing against the Teradek. There are some Teradek units that do use Wi-Fi, but I think the Bolt series specifically don't use Wi-Fi transmission. And a lot of people also commented on the fact that this doesn't blow everything else out of the water. When I said that, I was referring to everything else kind of using in this kind of price category. So everything else in this price category is basically using Wi-Fi. So for the performance, the price performance, again, I think this is pretty unmatched. Okay, so I'm gonna move to the top of the camera. On the top, I have obviously the CCH4. This is just the standard D-style handle, but also on the top I have the sliding adapter for the CCH4. So basically this allows me to quick release my top handle whenever I'm packing away in a case, but also allows me to slide the handle back and forth depending on, again, balance for the camera. And if I'm using a really big lens, then I can kind of adjust my handle to match that. So also extending from the top handle are these handle extensions, and I got this set mainly when I was using my Alexa a lot, and this is basically just extends the handle so I'm able to either make a Hollywood handle, and the nice thing about the CCH4 is that the handle extensions are kind of the same square profile as the handle itself, so it kind of really meshes in seamlessly. So again, a big reason for me choosing the ARRI system, the ARRI PCA system, is because I already owned a lot of ARRI accessories from the Alexa, so a lot of the little bits and bobs are easily transferable between the two. So also moving forward, I want to talk about the R&B. R&B, this comes with the set, and I have a bunch of these just from also, again, using my Alexa, and these are super handy to put kind of really wherever you want on the rig, just to have any kind of rod for literally whatever you need. So in this application, it's basically just mounting the NATO rail for the monitor, which we'll get to in a sec. And this is great because it's basically uses all the stock parts, and it's super light and keeps things really small. Another thing I also want to mention is, again, Tangerine's option. By using the front console, rod console, you can kind of mount it more traditionally like I would on Alexa, with two rods coming out the front. And then this bracket is light years ahead of just using a single R&B, because with R&B, it's not really designed, I think, just for being able to swivel. So if I have to adjust anything, I have to unloosen this, and then if I want to adjust the angle of the NATO rail, I have to unloosen another screw. So it's just, dare I say, time consuming, especially when I'm kind of in a crunch, like on, doing run and gun work, and I just need to change something really quickly. With this, it's literally, super smooth, and the tension is a lot more adjustable. So in my opinion, it's a lot more of an elegant solution. It's just kind of really big, and so I typically won't use this because, again, I like to preferably keep things really small. But again, that being said, I think it's kind of a trend with a lot of Tangerine stuff, is that if you're using bigger lenses, if you're sending the camera back, obviously that means you need to send the monitor much more forward to put it in a good position for your eye, so you're not having to crank your neck back and just be angry all day because your back hurts. Okay, so continuing the conversation about the EVF, this is Tangerine's touch loupe. This is an absolute must-have. Sony, I think, really dropped the ball with their stock, 90-degree, I don't know what the heck, who came up with this? And you have to look into a mirror it just makes it so long and unwieldy, and I hate this thing so much. So this thing kind of goes back to the FX9 days where I kind of had the Zacuto kind of flip out style. So it's nice because on the bottom it locks, and then you can obviously flip it up, it stays there. And it also, obviously, like I said, makes it much shorter, so you're not having to send the monitor as far back, camera as far back on the shoulder. So again, makes it much more ergonomic. I have a Blue Star eyepiece cushion. A lot of people use these. It just makes operating it's like you have a nice warm blanket around your eye. So I love having these. And the kind of key selling point for the touch loupe is that obviously when it's closed, you're operating on the shoulder, it has this little kind of flap on the bottom to where you can kind of peek your finger in and then still retain that touch functionality for autofocus. It's a good idea in practice, but when you're actually using it, it's kind of weird because as you stick your finger in and the flap comes up, it just kind of obstructs your view. So then you can't really see what or where you're selecting. So I just find myself not really using it, and unless I really have to, I tend to not really use touch tracking a ton. But it is there. It is nice. I do like that Bright Tangerine has thought of that. And again, I'm not complaining that it's there. So again, this touch loop is like one of the absolute must-haves for, I think, any Burano owner. And then rounding out the top of the camera is just this monitor setup. So I'm using the ARRI monitor mount. So they kind of, I think they came out with this kind of around when the High 5 just came out. And this monitor mount was so expensive. But when I say it was 1000% worth it, I absolutely mean it. It was just $500 well spent, because I've gone through so many other monitor mounts from other manufacturers that just end up sagging. You have to, it's gotten loose, I gotta tighten it. But I'm out in the field, like I don't have that specific Allen key, that just drives me absolutely crazy. With this, you don't need any tools. You can adjust the tension just straight from these thumb screws. And I've literally never needed to adjust it once. So I think that this monitor mount is definitely expensive, but I also think it's absolutely worth it, because again, with these types of things, I just don't want to have to worry about it, and I just want it to work, and I literally just don't want to think about it. So I think, in my opinion, money well spent. Others may say differently. That's fine too. Also, another really quick cool thing is that with the Easy Rig quick release, I love that ARRI thought of this, is that when the monitor is flipped all the way down, there's just enough clearance for that quick release bolt to clear. So when I'm storing the camera away or putting it away or whatever, I can flip the monitor down and not have to worry about damaging the screen with that bolt. So again, just the way that ARRI thinks about their product design and philosophy is just, I think, unmatched. So coming around to the top plate of the camera, you can see that I have just a bunch of Mondo ties just kind of littered everywhere, and these are really nice for keeping things super tidy. So I can't stand it when I see a messy builds, whether it's mine or out in the field. I just can't stand seeing like loose wires everywhere. So having these Mondo ties everywhere just makes things super, super easy. Also on the top, I have the Mid49 viewfinder extension cable. This is also one of the non-negotiables, absolute must-haves for any Burano owner, in my opinion, because the placement of the viewfinder port back here it just drives me crazy, because the included viewfinder cable is just way too short. So I'm really glad that Mid49 came up with the solution. To my understanding, Sony had actually given Mid49 a lot of the design specs for this cable, so that they could release it in a timely manner, because obviously I think Sony kind of dropped the ball on this whole camera release. So I think a lot of that was trying to help protect that. And the time that it took Mid49 to design and implement and produce this accessory is way faster than Sony could have ever done. So I think Sony realized that, and they were like, okay, listen, we know you can do it, so just get it out there, and it's amazing. Lately, I've been mounting it kind of towards the back of the camera, only because when I kind of push it to the front of the camera, the rod console kind of interferes with that. So if I'm not using the rod console, then I'll usually push this a lot far forward, and then it's just also really nice having that viewfinder port kind of terminate at the front of the camera, because I think that's where viewfinder ports should be, is at the front of the cameras. There's no reason it should be on the back of the camera. So again, this piece, just absolute, get it. So another one of my absolute must-haves for this camera is actually the sponsor of today's video. That's CordBag. CordBag makes really high quality storage accessories that I literally bring with me on just about every single job, whether it's for carrying media or storing random tools to even just random cables. They feel super premium, and that's because they are. They're made with super high quality, durable materials that you can actually count on when you're actually using them in the field. I'm always bringing a bunch of these with me on set, and not only do they help me stay organized, but they also help my ACs find exactly what they're looking for, since they're all easily identifiable. So CordBag actually have a bunch of new products available from NAB that I don't actually have my hands on yet, but one of them is the new cord wall, which is a really efficient way of actually storing all of your cord pouches. I used to use a simple metal pegboard in the past, which worked really well, but I like this method a lot better because I can access all of my bags at a glance, and when I'm prepping for a job, I can just easily see what's available, pick it off the wall, and just go. Cord Bag also has an entire ecosystem of accessories, so you can really tailor these pouches to your specific workflow. And keep in mind that these aren't specific to camera department. I personally know a few of my sound buddies who have gotten a bunch and have found tons of uses for them. So if you're interested in upping your storage game, then you can use the link in my description and use code IsThatARed to take 15% off your entire order. So get organized and check out Cord Bag. Okay, so I'm gonna start moving towards the back of the camera. And as you can see, it's kind of long and kind of big, and I totally get that. A lot of people like smaller builds. I like smaller builds too, but again, I'll kind of get into it. This is the Mid49 gold mount battery plate, and in my opinion, this offers, I think, the best balance of ports for kind of any of the battery plate options available right now. And a kind of added benefit of that is that their system actually mounts directly to the back via this little plate here. So it's literally locked on there. So even if I push the release button, it's literally not coming anywhere. So I really love that. It has 2 DTAP ports, a bunch of fishers, a bunch of 2 pins. It has a USB PD port, but it only does the 5-volt 3-amp protocol. I wish it did more, honestly, because then I would be able to run this DJI SDR just right from this USB PD port. But this uses the 9-volt protocol, so I have to use a separate DTAP cable, which is fine, but if I was able to just use one single slim DTAP PD cable, that would have, I think, obviously been ideal. There's also a smart fuse built in, which I really like. Depending on your battery's load capacity, you can go from 20 amp, 12 amp, and 10 amp, so you can kind of allocate the remaining available power based on that, which is awesome. And then it also obviously has the XLR that you can use. Speaking of XLR, another one of my must-have accessories is the Stay Puft power cable. So this basically goes into a standard 4-pin XLR, and it kind of juts out like that. And then it's this cable that basically uses little magnetic quick release. So, and then this would go into your standard battery power supply or a battery block. So again, I typically use the DJI power stations. And so this is nice when I'm kind of planted somewhere, if I'm on the dolly, or if I'm kind of in a more studio setting or just doing interviews. This is great. These are typically designed for Steadicam operators. So if you're Steadicam and imagine you're up really quick, you can quickly just snap this off and load up your rig and then just walk off. So in the past, you don't have to worry about forgetting that you're tethered via an AC cable and then taking the rig off, walking away, and then just taking your whole stand down. So it's kind of like same concept as the MagSafe cables for MacBooks. So also moving further back, I have what's called a C-Box. So I've had this C-Box since my FS7 days, and this camera and its limitations have kind of breathed new life into the C-Box. So what a C-Box does is basically it just distributes a video signal out into multiple different ports. So basically, if you saw my last Burano video, you'll know that it's extremely frustrating that this camera cannot display your video overlays when you're in XAVC-I mode, which is probably what I'm filming in 90% of the time. So most of the time, I just don't need RAW. I'm not using RAW. Clients aren't asking for RAW, so I'm using XAVC-I, XAVC whatever, and you can't have monitor overlays in that mode, which is just absolutely frustrating. So my entire hardware workaround for that at the moment is by using the C-Box. So I'll run an HDMI cable into here, and then from here I have 3 different SDI ports out that I can use, or 2 HDMI's outputs if I wanted. But this way I'm able to output all of the info from the screen via HDMI, and then run that into the C-Box, and then from the C-Box, I'm able to go into my monitor, my transmitter, whatever. So that's kind of my workaround. From what I'm told, the HDMI output path has more processing power so that it's able to deliver that information on the screen. I don't understand how that works, but it is what it is. And from talking with some of the people at Sony, it sounds like that's not something that can really be added via firmware. I don't know why. Again, that's...
It is what it is. It is what it is.
When I am recording XOCN, sometimes I'll just skip this and shorten up this rig a little bit because, again, I can put the info display on my monitor. And it's a little bit frustrating because when some of these SDI ports are being occupied, it does kind of interfere with some of these Fisher and 2-pin ports from the Mid49 D-Box. So, and again, luckily I have 3 separate ports that I can kind of manage and kind of alleviate that, but still annoying. A few quick notable mentions from Mid49. They also make this PL port cover. So when you're not using your PL mount, Sony doesn't really offer any kind of cover for the back, which has metal contacts. So you can get this little cover and just snap it on the back and just kind of help protect some of those contacts. You can also just download this for free from their website if you have a 3D printer. If you don't, you can just order one, which I've done here. They also do the same with this EVF or monitor cover. So in this case, I don't really use it because I'm using the bright Tangerine Loupe, but if I weren't, I could just put this straight over the monitor and protect it. And so this is also really helpful when your stuff is in transit. And then lastly, I have to mention the Mid49 pivot adapter. So when you're using these stock EVF, obviously, it's a 90-degree rotation, and you're not gonna, nobody's gonna be unscrewing this and screwing it back and then flipping the monitor up just to see the monitor. Nobody's gonna do that. So Mid49 made this a swivel adapter so you can kind of swivel it. I have kind of since taken it off after getting the bright Tangerine Loupe because you can still use the 2 in tandem, but I just find myself not flipping it as much since I can just, do it the right way and just flip the loop up like that. It also there's a little bit of play I found. It's not a ton, but I just prefer having things a little bit more secure and a little bit more locked down. So that's why I've kind of taken it off and I've just kind of stuck with this solution. All right, coming to the end of it, I want to mention the C-bar again. I think I've talked about this before, but this is from a company called Apex, and it's just called their Z-Bar. It's basically just a little platform that you can put wherever you want to mount extra stuff, like a timecode box or an audio hop, literally whatever, or video transmitter. Sometimes if I don't have the specific screw mount, I'll just dual lock it straight to here. So obviously it comes with 2 3/8-inch screws, so you can put this wherever, whatever orientation. I've in the past just mounted it just right off the top handle just like that and have mounted just extra stuff there. So this has just been super handy just to have in a pinch. And lastly, I want to talk about filters. This is an IR cut filter. As you may have seen, this camera seems to have a lot of IR pollution, and it's tricky because I've kind of tested it in a few different environments. Some cases, it's just night and day. I notice it immediately. Other times, I've tested it with tungsten lights with really deep black fabrics and just have not been able to reproduce it. So I think there are a lot of variables at play. And in my opinion, from my experience, what I've noticed is that when I'm in a really sunny environment, any kind of exterior, these are absolutely 100% needed. And so in places like here in Vegas or in California, I've just really quick A/B test on off. It's just, again, the difference is night and day. But other people have commented that they don't really notice as much IR pollution. And part of me thinks that attributes just to being in a different climate. It kind of makes sense when you think of infrared radiation as heat. So obviously the sun's beaming down outside all day and kind of radiating heat. And so as that light gets absorbed through all these different objects and fabrics, obviously it's going to radiate more heat the hotter it is. So, again, in my experience, I found that in a lot more sunny environments, air pollution is way more evident. So I have a bunch of these to fit a bunch of G Master lenses. If I'm using a PL lens, then I'll just use an ARRI ND. I'll usually start with a base of like 0.9, and then I'll kind of ride the internal variable ND. But it's just something that it seems like we can't really get away from. So, and also this has become probably one of the biggest considerations of actually me using or choosing to use this camera when I'm kind of picking out cameras for a job is what kind of environment am I going to be in? Will I need NDs? How much NDs will I need? And how much infrared pollution / radiation will there be? So again, filters have become, they've always been a part of the conversation, but they've kind of become a much more prominent variable in terms of choosing equipment. Okay, so that all being said, it's a great camera, and again, this is kind of my personal preference in terms of rigging and usability. And 6 months later, do I still like this camera? It's obviously yes. I've been using this camera a ton lately. I have kind of been dumbfounded with the image quality from the Burano. I'm just super impressed by one, the dynamic range, and obviously it's inherited a lot of the great color science from the Venice 2. There was a recent job I was on. I was filming on a yacht, and we're doing a golden hour shot, just shooting straight into the sun. And the roll-off, after a really quick grade, the roll-off was just immaculate. It was nothing ever seemed like it clipped. And again, I was shooting directly into the sun. And so I have just been super impressed with this camera. And I always remember when I was first using the FX9, the image quality bump from the FS7 to the FX9, to me, was super noticeable. And I'm noticing that same image quality bump from the FX9 to the Burano. So I've been, again, super happy. I do think Sony went kind of crazy with that price tag, I'm not gonna lie. Especially given all the current offerings from a lot of the other brands like Canon or Red. And obviously the rolling shutter was pretty bad, but again, how many people do you see talking about rolling shutter now? It's like nobody really ever films like that. And if you're filming like that for a creative purpose, then you probably should choose another camera. But in the 6 months that I've had it, it's never once come up. It's never once jumped out at me. And I agree, it's not great, but again, in most applications, you're not really going to notice it like that. And so wrapping up, I think in terms of market adoption, I think this camera still has a little bit of ways to go. The FX6 is still kind of reigning supreme. That camera is so popular. I see that camera so much out. It's almost like back when the FS7 was super popular and you saw that camera everywhere. Now I'm seeing that same exact trend with the FX6. So that camera is also really great, and I've no issues using that camera if I had to. That being said, I still think I'm gonna get rid of my FX6s and FX9s just because I'm at the point in my career where I just don't need all these extra cameras, and I don't need to be spending extra time to prep 2 whole extra camera packages. Like, I just rather not do that. And I'm more than happy with having 2 of some of the best cameras available in the world. So hopefully this video is helpful. I always enjoy little kind of gear videos like this. Affiliate links will be down in the description, so don't be commenting on what this piece is called. Just look down in the description. Thank you for making it this far, and I'll see you in the next one.